So, my higher self decides that it wants to, or he wants, she, whatever my higher self is, wants to come through and talk for a while. And I think I will talk about, right now, what's on my mind is my relationship to marijuana during this last 20 months of intense spiritual growth, and as my role as an addict. Now, I've kind of had an off and on relationship with marijuana because of that identity, that label of being an addict. If you resonate with my material, you're probably at a stage in your understanding of things where you realize that spiritual gifts have been pathologized and stunted and labeled as mental health issues. Some cases, this is true and easily remedied, like, anxiety and depression. But when you start getting into the more complicated ones, ADHD, PTSD, autism, these are all spiritual gifts that society doesn't want us to be aware of. You probably all realize that by now. Where the hell was I going to go with that? That's the one thing about doing this. I smoked a few puffs before doing this because that's what I do to pamper myself once in a while. And because a lot of ideas flow through. So this might be a very rambling, wandering message. So it's like whatever Spirit wants to talk about is going to come through. Marijuana also, because a lot of my education over the last 20 months has come from the internet, using my discernment, using prayer and such to discern what's bullshit, what's not. Sometimes that's really hard to pick through. And sometimes, I get messages that I perceive the wrong way because there are lower vibrational forces at play that are testing you constantly, trying to get you to doubt. And so there have been times when I thought, okay, marijuana is a bad thing. I'm an addict. I should stay away from marijuana. And then after a while, it would kind of come to me, I'd get spiritual clarity, and it'd be like, oh, you know what, marijuana is not that bad. And I'd go back and forth with it, depending on whether I'm having a low cycle or I'm vibrating high, depending on what's going on. My kind of closing thoughts at the end of this journey are that marijuana has been helpful for me at every stage. There was a time I had to walk away from it because I realized it was one part that I'm finishing out a cycle of coming into balance with an aspect of my spirituality, and that was giving over control to my higher self. And I was relying at that point on marijuana to get me through some tough times, relying on it for inspiration, even though I can do these things without. But there's a reason I'm supposed to go through the tough times I'm going through. I need to experience these experiences without the influence of anything. I really need to sit in these energies and truly understand them, get everything out of them I can. And so I was kind of using marijuana to escape that. And my ego, that worldly side of me, that out of balance masculine energy was like, no. It was not going to give up anything that it deemed to be losing control. And that was just another thing it felt like it was losing control of. Because out here on this journey, I have given up literally everything. The only thing that survived this journey is my social security card, birth certificate, and a belt. Like, I'm not just talking physically, I'm talking spiritually, mentally, emotionally. I got rid of so much. I can't even begin to quantify or even begin to explain how much I've gotten rid of. And it's come down to the point where I'm down to just like a last couple of things. The last couple of things my ego is resisting, holding out on for dear life. And one of them was marijuana. So I gave up on it. And I kind of left it to the universe, to my higher self, to God, whatever you want to call. And I said, okay, I'm being completely honest. I like marijuana. I like its benefits. I understand where I'm at. I'm not going to justify my using it as a crutch. So I release it. If it's meant to come back into my life, then allow it to come back into my life. You've been very good about keeping toxic things out of my life once I've learned my lesson about them. So I'm going to trust in this. So it came back into my life. And I'm happy about that, because it's not something I want to use all the time. I have researched marijuana a bit. I've researched how it's used in ancient cultures and such, and the sacredness of it. And I agree to some aspects of the sacredness of it, but not all of it. In fact, actually, the way I meditate, a lot of my spiritual practices are not the classical standard, or however you want to say it. They're not the traditional ways. I've applied a lot of creativity in my spiritual methods. My feeling is that once you understand what that method is trying to achieve, and you know how to work within the parameters of universal law, you can do whatever you want. As long as it's not self-harming and it's done out of love, do whatever you want. So here at the end with marijuana, I just want to say to you all that marijuana has, as you probably well know, so many practical uses. In the beginning stages, at the very beginning, it was instrumental in helping me to kick my habit of my fentanyl addiction. Because THC was the only thing I could find that alleviated the dope sickness, as they call it, the withdrawals, which are, when you're going through a spiritual awakening and withdrawals and Lyme disease at the same time, let me tell you, that is intense. You'll take anything. And the fentanyl mind doesn't want marijuana. It wants something that's going to make it feel like fentanyl. So you kind of have to force yourself to. But when you're in the middle of dope sickness, I got to the point where I'd try anything. So I tried marijuana. I just got so stoned that after a while, I didn't even realize I was dope sick anymore, and I was engrossed in a movie and eating and having a good time. So it's great in that respect. It was also great in the next stages, because there were times when I would be going through a lull period and my creativity would just be down the toilet. No creativity at all. Life completely slowed down. I felt like I was on pause, wondering what I was doing wrong. And then when I'd finally figure out what it was that I needed to learn and the clouds cleared, I would find this wonderful plant coming into my life, and it would allow me to slow down enough, because I wasn't as good with meditation as I am now. I still got a ways to go on that. It allowed me to slow down and process the information thoroughly. And I would get revelations from it. I would get these same revelations without it. It just took me more, it'd take me more time. Because something about marijuana allows me to free myself of the egoic mind to some extent. It just kind of, I don't know, I have to think more on the process to be able to articulate that in words. And I find that whether it be indica or sativa, both of them have their uses if you use them the right way. Indica, I found, was really good at times when I was going through a lot of stress. My physical environment was such that it was really hard to rest, like being stuck out in the cold and the rain with no protection, so I'm constantly on the move trying to find dry places to go. Really difficult. So having that indica, when I do find a place that's dry, even though it's not completely comfortable, when I'm trying to just let go as best I can and just give myself over to resting no matter what it takes, that indica just allowed me to physically react to relax just enough to be able to do that. There are times I don't, in the beginning stages, if you need to use a crutch, use a crutch. Don't be hard on yourself. Just do whatever you need to do to prioritize your internal peace and your happiness. Whatever that takes, that is your number one priority. Find that balance, that harmony. I don't care what it takes. If you're doing it in a toxic way now, you stay in that energy long enough, eventually, I promise you're going to figure out how to remove that crutch from your life. You will come to a point where you realize you don't need it anymore. If you just stay true to your growth. Marijuana has been a great thing. I really am an advocate of it. The sativa side of it. That was really good for. You got to be careful with this. You do have to be responsible how you smoke it. There's too many people that use it recreationally, and those of us who have done hard drugs, you probably have especially if you used to do meth, you kind of have a go big or go home attitude towards using things, and that's what gets people who go from meth to fentanyl killed really quick. But it also, if you use marijuana, it can get you into some intense anxiety attacks. You want to take really small dosages, and work yourself up to that point where you feel okay. So you don't push yourself into the point of anxiety. If you're getting anxiety, either A, you're using the wrong strain. I find that indica for me can cause anxiety really easy, but then so can sativas, because sativa can get the mind racing. So it depends on what is giving you anxiety, really. If you're in a situation where you're being physically threatened, I wouldn't recommend the indica. Actually, I probably wouldn't recommend either one of them. But in my experience, having that too much of the indica really caused me intense anxiety. But if it was something that was more mental, and I smoked sativa, then I found it would get my thoughts racing, and it would provide paranoid thinking. Now, this is one of the dangers to look out for when you're using marijuana in your spiritual growth, is if you are prone to anxiety and things like that, and marijuana enhances it. You have to be aware that if you use it in too high of dose, or it gets you to that point where you start having intrusive, worried, paranoid thoughts, that might not be for you at that time. I don't really, truly recommend regular usage of marijuana till you get to the point where you found peace and harmony enough in yourself where the anxiety can no longer get in. If it's not affecting you in your regular day-to-day life, it's probably not going to affect you while you smoke. I think it's great medication, obviously. I mean, CBD has its benefits. The medical society and the field of psychology, all fields applied or that relate to the use of fentanyl, of all these services, all of them say that there is no way to deal with detox symptoms. That's not true, though. Marijuana does do that. I promise you it does. Now, what else do I want to talk about? I've had a lot on my mind lately. I am a multi-perspective person. And I learned with my ADHD that it's not about the inability to focus on something. It's the the difficulty in settling on one thing for a period of time. I've kind of learned just to kind of roll with it. Whatever my mind's on at that point must be what I'm supposed to be dwelling on at that point. Having multiple personalities and dealing with spirits of all kinds is kind of handy to have this ability, because much more can be expressed through you. I don't know the individual energies at this point. I know there's some people that are really good at picking out who or what they're talking to in the higher realms. I have no idea. It's all the same to me inside my head at this point, because I've been doing it my whole life and didn't know until this last year that I'm communicating with things other than not other than myself. They're all part of me, just like they're a part of you, but you know what I mean. Things that are another point of consciousness. Let's talk about, this kind of ties into my relationship with relaxation or resting, work and play. When you get to the point where you're mastering yourself spiritually, you're finally getting down to those final lessons, and you'll know, if you're there, you'll know. Although I gotta say, I thought many times I was there, and then I find myself surprised at how much farther I came a few months later. But this time I actually know, because I can actually sit there and nothing comes to mind as far as what could be blocking me. For the first time in my existence, there's nothing blocking me spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically. Because I brought everything into balance. Or everything that I need to move forward, at least into the next big stage of my life. And one of the biggest things that I learned to balance was the rest, work, play relationship. The play I'm still working on. I'm working on bringing that in, but I first had to balance out the work and the rest. My first big lesson on that was when this journey, about a month after this journey started out, I had caught a ride with a van full of buskers, and I'd gotten into an argument with them. We saw different ways, and it didn't matter where we were at that point. I was frustrated enough. I wasn't going to put up with the BS that was going on. I told them to just let me out of the van, and that happened to be about 2-3 miles outside the entrance of Yosemite National Park. And I had no resources. I had nothing on me but my backpack, a coat, and I was fresh off of drugs, or I just quit fairly recently. I was obese, I was out of shape, I was weak, sick, and this is where I had my first lesson in rest and work. Because being in that physical condition, I could only push myself so far. It was really easy to wear myself down. So I would hike until I couldn't hike anymore. Well, not quite. I didn't push myself to the point where my legs are giving out, because I learned really quickly, if I'm going to get through this journey, I got to take better care of myself. So I would go until I would start to get tired. My heart start racing, start to build up a sweat, and then I'd stop and I'd do a breathing exercise. And breathing exercises were still very difficult for me at that time. But when you don't have any distractions of internet, because you're not getting internet out there, you don't have any worldly distractions, you got nothing better to do, you're trying to keep your mind off of the fact that you have no food incoming, it becomes a little bit easier to focus on things like that. And I went through a lot physically for the condition that I was in, and I would not have made it through without those breathing exercises and meditation. This is where I learned how important meditation is to resting your body. So I learned then to go 50-50 with it. For as much time as I spent walking, I spent at least that much time resting. And real rest, not distracting myself in any way, just letting my mind just relax, letting my body just relax, let everything go. You guys probably already know all about this. And there are stages to this balance, because you got to find that middle ground, that perfect middle shade of gray in between that spectrum of black and white, that up and down. There are stages to it. And I balanced my feminine and masculine to an extent for the first time, I think, 6 months ago. Maybe a bit longer. There are stages to that. And when I got to a point in the journey, after I got out of there and I traveled around for a bit more, went from different towns, went to San Francisco, went to Santa Rosa, Healdsburg, some other towns, mostly walking. I got to a point where I came here to Folsom, where I had good enough resources that I could eat really well. And I kind of came to the conclusion that I could mix something like meditation with pleasure. Like, I would sit there and I'd be pigging out, smoking marijuana, and meditating at the same time. Or I would be doing work, mixing all three. I'd be working and relaxing and having fun at the same time. My point is that during this balancing process, don't be afraid to intermix these. Make your work as fun as possible. If you want to, make your fun and your rest as productive as possible, while still honoring the rest itself, the play itself, and the work itself. Harmony is being fully in your middle path, I guess, with everything, as best you can be. You can't maintain that constantly. There's still going to be ups and downs, but to have a basically resting balanced area in which you reside, oh man, I tell you, when you achieve that, when you start achieving that in areas, it really starts to unlock a level of understanding of your gifts, of your place in this world, of how the world works. I'm blown away with what my understanding of things is, how I see things now, is compared to what it was just a year ago. A year ago, my mind was blown wide open. I mean, actually 3 years ago, it was blown wide open with my first, like, non-religious spiritual experience. Blown wide open. And I thought I knew things then. At every stage, I think I know. No, I never think I know a lot. I've always been the one who thinks the more I know, the less I know. You know, I've never been really egotistical about that. But at the same time, there is a bit of ego in that. Not in a bravado way, but there's that side of me that knows that I'm smart, and I overestimate my own intelligence in some ways. I think that maybe my way is better than another way without having given it a try. I used to be at that stage. Not that way anymore. Now I stay open-minded. Because there's no such thing as right or wrong or good or evil. There's just what works for you and what doesn't. Anyway, I think I'm going to cut this rambling short, because I think I'm done for now. Anyway, bye.